Hey folks, what I wanted to do was sort of take you through this evaluation document that we use. Most of you have gotten from me like sort of a notes sheet after each observation, and that's just sort of like a shorthand that says, hey, these are the main things that we want to tell you how you're doing. But actually, the document that we're going to be turning in for each of you is actually really long. Um, it's kind of a bummer sometimes to fill out, but that's okay. What we do is we put your name here, whoever your cooperating teacher is, where you're at, and then we put in our names as the university supervisors. Now, for all of you, it's going to be listed as me, but I know that some of you know that Dr. Cole has been doing some observations as well. But because technically I'm assigning all of the grades, that it goes under my name. Then we put the dates that we see you, when, like where we're seeing you and what class it is. So if it's like freshman orchestra or seventh grade band or something like that, we put that in there, and then the time of the day. So that's no big deal. We give some general notes on the observation. For each observation, you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They usually don't take up the entire page. They're just sort of places for us to make generalized comments. And then we get into the standards. This is where it starts to get a little hairy. You can see that we have check boxes for each of the observations. Now, as far as I've ever been able to see, I have never given anybody emergent candidate things. I mean, I guess it's possible that that could happen, but typically that is not what happens. The categories in which I'm usually checking boxes are in developing candidate, proficient candidate, and accomplished candidate type of boxes. Usually more proficient and accomplished than developing, but in some cases I am checking some developing candidate boxes. So in this one, it's essentially about leading in your classroom. It's about how you're evaluating your student progress toward high school graduation. One of the ways that you can show that you're doing that is by making sure that the lesson plans that I see show that your learning objectives, everything that you're doing is connected to the North Carolina Essential Standards for music for the grades that you're teaching. So, because right here, by aligning instruction and assessment with the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So if you're planning lessons that involve the North Carolina essential standards and your assessments are based on that, then you're doing what you need to do. Maintaining or supporting a classroom culture that empowers students to collaborate and become lifelong learners. Yes, that it's different than just playing as a band or playing as an orchestra or singing together as a chorus. Essentially, it is having them engaged in like learning teams of some kind. There is another standard about that, but yeah, it's essentially how are you getting them to work with one another in ways other than just the typical music making experience that they get in the large ensemble. Sometimes if those two are checked, I don't check the other two, but things like maintains a safe and orderly classroom that facilitates student learning, uses positive management of student behavior, including strategies of conflict resolution and anger management, effective communication for diffusing and de-escalating disruptive or dangerous behavior, and safe and appropriate seclusion and restraint. This doesn't get seen all that often, but in situations where maybe you have a classroom where some students struggle to stay on task and you have some kids that talk out or maybe sometimes are a little bit defiant when you give directions, the way that you handle that will have a lot to do with the difference between developing and proficient is understands positive management of student behavior and uses. So it could be that you understand it but you're not able to do it, or that you are actually doing it when it is necessary. If you have classes that just do what you ask them to do all of the time, it's hard for me to observe that. Let's see, demonstrate leadership in the school. This is the one that I just can't observe it in the moment, because what I'm not seeing is you participating in a professional learning community activity. I don't know that you're doing that unless I ask you. So what I'm going to be doing is saying, hey guys, are you doing anything that's like that? Now, Cleveland County Schools has an elementary general music teacher meeting once a month, where people get involved with that. It is a PLC. Do you have activities like that that you're engaging in? So, things like that will help me know whether you are extending your skills and knowledge. Works with others in developing or implementing school improvement activities. Again, this is a hard one to see, because that's not what you're doing in the classroom when you're standing in front of the ensemble. So one of the things that you guys are going to do that's in the portfolio is that the pamphlet thing where you gather all of that information about your school and you create the strategies for addressing something that will help high school graduation rates, or whatever the things are, the issues that you identify with your school, the strategies that you identify for improving your school will help me to be able to evaluate that. Lead the teaching profession, which you guys know how I feel about things like that. Should you really be leaders in the teaching profession at this particular moment, so early in your career? Maybe not. I think it's a little developmentally inappropriate, but that doesn't mean that I don't have to assess you on your ability to do this anyway. Seeks additional opportunities for professional development and growth. For example, are you going to NCMEA conference? I hope that you all are planning on going, but if you can't go, are you planning on doing something else that will help you? For example, if there is an opportunity to participate in a festival or something that you technically don't have to go to, or that is being attended by somebody else in your school that's in a different discipline, like if you are in the orchestra classroom, is the choir director going to something that you can tag along for and help out with, and that you can learn from? If you're doing something like that, that would be an example of seeking additional opportunities to grow professionally. Extends professional relationships and networks. What kinds of things are you doing to get to know people outside of just your cooperating teacher? Other people in the county, other people in the district, etc. Attending NCMEA would definitely fit that as well. Or, if it's a thing where I'm just really starting to get out there, beginning to develop your professional relationships and networks, great. Advocate for schools and students. This is tough to see in the classroom sometimes, but implements and adheres to policies and practices that positively affect student learning. That you can see. What types of things are you doing in your classroom that can positively affect your students' learning? Lots of things. The way that you interact with students, the way that that students are encouraged to interact with you, with one another. What type of environment is there in the classroom? And are you implementing it and adhering to what your cooperating teacher is already doing, or are you developing and revising policies and practices to improve student learning? Are you doing something different than your cooperating teacher does that's been an improvement? That would be really great if that's the case. Teachers demonstrate high ethical standards. I hope that every single one of you are always in the proficient or accomplished box for this. Models the tenets of the Code of Ethics for North Carolina educators and the standards for professional conduct, and encourages others to do the same. It's either that or upholds, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff that I just said. Then we're on to Standard 2, and I know that this is a little tedious, but it would be wrong of me to assess you on something that you were not aware of, and so that's why I'm making you aware of this and going through each of the standards. Teachers provide an environment in which each child has a positive, nurturing relationship with caring adults. Either you are maintaining a positive and nurturing learning environment that has already been established by your cooperating teacher, or you're enhancing it in some way, shape, or form. Is there something that you are doing that is making it more respectful, more inclusive, more flexible, etc., than what's going on with your cooperating teacher? Teachers embrace diversity in the school community and in the world. So this one gets a little busy. There's a lot of checkboxes here. Appropriately uses materials or lessons that counteract stereotypes and acknowledge the contributions of all cultures. Incorporates different points of view in instruction. Understands the influence of diversity and plans instruction accordingly. Or in the accomplished candidate box, consistently integrates culturally relevant and or sensitive materials and ideas throughout the curriculum. If you're doing it for your unit lesson plan, it's more like proficient candidate rather than accomplished. And with accomplished, you're doing it all of the time, regardless of whether or not you have the unit plan to do. And then builds on diversity as an asset in the classroom. How can you do that? And it's really important here to look just outside of race. I mean, it's not just as easy as saying, hey, I'm going to call on white kids and black kids and Asian kids and all kinds of kids in the classroom. It is looking at how your classroom is diverse. How is it diverse? You may be at a school where it is not a racially diverse school. Not that that's the only type of diversity there is anyway, but what about kids from different socioeconomic, well, I hate to say, from households that have different socioeconomic means, from kids who listen to different types of music, who have had different backgrounds growing up. Some of you might be in a situation where you have kids that live in a more rural environment and other ones who live in a more urban environment, depending on the school at which you're teaching. So in what ways can you build on diversity and have it be a strength rather than a dividing factor in your classroom? Teachers treat students as individuals. If you call your kids by name, it's really important when you call on them instead of like, you saxophone girl. See if you can find ways to be able to know your students' names, even if that means them hanging their name. I guess we call it like a name tag type of thing on their stands or whatever, or just learning all of their names, which is tough depending on how many kids you have. But maintains a learning environment that conveys high expectations of every student, enhances a learning environment that meets the needs of individual students. How can you do that with your instruction? Adapt their teaching for the benefits of students with special needs, cooperates with specialists and uses resources to support the special learning needs of all students, uses research-verified strategies to provide effective learning activities for students with special needs. There is a difference between that and coordinating and collaborating with a full range of support specialists. This essentially means, hey, if the special ed teacher has said this is the IEP for this student, and you have to follow this, then that would be like cooperating with specialists. If you're coordinating and collaborating, essentially that means you're having a conversation with the person, either the special educator or the aide or the student themselves or the parents or whoever that is, in order to meet the student's needs outside of, in addition to what's already in the IEP. Effectively engages special needs students. It should be students with special needs, they're people first, but in learning activities and ensures their unique learning needs are met. So again, that's a little bit different than the one under proficient candidate. It just goes a little bit further. The last one in Standard 2 is teachers work collaboratively with the families and significant adults in the lives of their students. So this one is very hard to observe in the moment, so it's a thing I need to ask you about. Communicates and collaborates with the home and community for the benefit of students. So are you communicating with parents? Are you communicating with the surrounding community in order to help your students in some way, shape, or form? That could be something just as easy as having a website that for parents. A lot of teachers have websites through the school that they can use to update parents on what's going on in the classroom, for homework, for concert dates, for any of those things. The accomplished candidate for this one is seeks and implements solutions to overcome obstacles to participation of families and communities. Because even if you're communicating and collaborating, there are going to be some people that you miss. What are the ways that you can try and cover all of your bases? If you're trying the very best that you can to cover all the bases to communicate with the community or the parents, then you're sort of in this accomplished candidate box, this area. We're on to standard 3. This is the one that, for the most part, most of you should be getting accomplished candidate in. Teachers align their instruction with the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. That is, for accomplished candidate, it is developing and applying strategies that reflect the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. That's the North Carolina Essential Standards for Music for us, and standards developed by professional organizations to make the curriculum balanced, rigorous, and relevant. And then evaluating and reflecting upon the effectiveness of literacy instruction within and across content areas. That one might be a little harder to get, but the ones that are definitely within the grasp of every student in student teaching right now is develops and applies lessons based on the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, and it integrates effective literacy instruction throughout the curriculum and across student or content areas to enhance student learning. Those are all things that you should be doing. At the absolute very least, it should be proficient candidate for every one of you. 3B, this is another one that should be spot on for all of you, an accomplished candidate. Teachers know the content appropriate to their teaching specialty. Demonstrates extensive knowledge of the content in the teaching specialty is under accomplished candidate. I kind of expect that of all of you. The harder part of that is prompt student curiosity for learning beyond the required coursework. How can you get them to go past just singing this here song in choir or playing this here thing in orchestra? How can they apply what it is that you're teaching to something else in their lives, either to other playing that they'll be doing or listening that they'll be doing in other parts of their lives, etc. Proficient candidate demonstrates an appropriate level of content knowledge in the teaching specialty. But if you're really struggling with something and you're like, I don't know how to do this, it might be developing candidate. You need to make sure that if you need to brush up on something, you got to brush up on it. Encourages students to investigate the content area to expand their knowledge and satisfy their natural curiosity. Hopefully that is a thing that is happening for all of you. It's not just how can we do what we're doing in class, how can you apply this to your musicking outside of this class. The next part of Standard 3 is teachers recognize the interconnectedness of content areas and disciplines. The proficient candidate demonstrates knowledge of links between grade and subject and the North Carolina Standard Course of Study by relating content to other disciplines. Relates global awareness to the subject. This is not just in your unit plan. This is other places as well. The accomplished candidate integrates the links and the vertical alignment of the grade or subject area and the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, effectively and broadly relates content to other disciplines, and then integrates global awareness activities throughout lesson plans and classroom instructional practices. So again, not just the unit plan, in other ways as well. 3D. Teachers make instruction relevant to students. How are you consistently integrating 21st century skills, content, etc. throughout the classroom instruction and assessment? So it's not just for the unit plan, I will help them inspire creativity, make them use critical thinking, and collaborate with one another. You need to be doing that throughout the semester. The proficient candidate integrates 21st century skills and content in instruction. Let's see. We're on to Standard 4. Teachers know the ways in which learning takes place, and they know the appropriate levels of intellectual, physical, social, and emotional development of their students. So essentially it's, do you understand how your kids learn? Do you understand how who they are socially, physically, etc. contributes to how well they will learn something in your classroom? The proficient candidate will identify developmental levels of individual students and plan their instruction accordingly. So if you're planning stuff that's too hard for your kids based on where they are developmentally, either musically, physically, socially, etc. If you're planning something inappropriate for them, well, then you're not hitting this standard. If you're assessing and using resources needed to address strengths and weaknesses of students, that's another mark of a proficient candidate. If you're an accomplished candidate, you are appropriately differentiating instruction. The next part of Standard 4 is teachers plan instruction appropriate for their students. If you are proficient, you're collaborating with your colleagues to monitor student performance and make instruction responsive to cultural differences and individual learning needs. Yes, that is the proficient candidate. That's not like the whiz-bang, oh my goodness, you're the best teacher that's ever walked the planet standard. That is the, hey, you're graduating and passing standard. The accomplished candidate will work collaboratively with other school staff to develop or maintain a culturally and developmentally supportive school environment. With 4C, teachers use a variety of instructional methods. So if you're standing on the box waving the stick the whole time and you use no questioning techniques, the kids are never doing anything independently, and it's just you giving instruction all the time, and it's all teacher focused, that is not using a variety of instructional methods. So you need to switch it up. Often throughout your instruction, not only because you'd be surprised what you'll learn about what your students know, but because it is good to change pace. And if what we want to create are independent musicians, it can't just be I tell you what to do and you do it all the time. Because then all you learn is they can do the things I ask them to do when I tell them how to do it. You don't learn what they really know about music in those situations. So the proficient candidate uses a variety of appropriate methods and materials to meet the needs of all students. The accomplished candidate consistently enables the success of all students through the selection and use of appropriate methods and materials. So that's not even just, hey, you're selecting good materials that can meet the needs of all students. You are consistently doing it, and you're using teaching methods that allow those materials, the interaction with the materials and what the students know and are able to do through these variety of assessments to show you what kids are able to do. A variety of kids with a variety of different engagements. Teachers integrate and utilize technology in their instruction. This one is tough because some of you don't have a lot of what we would think of as traditional technology. Like maybe you don't have a smartboard. Maybe your smartboard is broken. Maybe you don't have a computer in the classroom. That's okay. Don't forget that technology means a lot of things. Technology could mean a tuner. Technology could mean a metronome. Technology could mean using a CD player. Yes, I did just say a CD player. It could be Dr. Beat. It could even just be the instruments that they're playing. I know Dr. Cole interprets this standard that way very often. But are you integrating technology with instruction to maximize student learning? If you are, you're a proficient candidate. Sometimes there's just technology for technology's sake, and that's just silly. It needs to contribute to the learning environment and what the kids are actually trying to learn in order for it to be useful for this standard. The accomplished candidate is going to engage their students in higher level thinking through the integration of technology. For example, giving them a musical problem to solve on the smartboard, like, hey, this is what's going on, or let's listen to this piece. What could they do to do X, Y, Z, or how could they change X, Y, Z? That fits into a thing that you're trying to teach. That would be solving a musical problem. You are using technology in that situation. It doesn't have to be the kids sit down at a computer and compose. That is an integration of technology that is at a high level, but if you don't have the availability for that, that doesn't mean that you're not going to meet this standard. Teachers help develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills. This relates back to what I just said, actually. The proficient candidate will integrate specific instruction that helps students develop the ability to apply processes and strategies for critical thinking and problem solving. The accomplished candidate will create or maintain instruction that consistently engages students in the processes of critical thinking and problem solving in meaningful contexts. So it's not just critical thinking, it is critical thinking often and in ways that are applicable to what the students are doing in the classroom and out of the classroom. Don't forget, if you're going to ask a question, if you're going to take class time to ask a question, make sure that it's a meaningful question that actually integrates what you're trying to have the students learn about that day. An appropriate, great question that involves critical thinking in your classroom is not, okay, who wants to do this, or who wants to show this on the board, or do you guys think you're ready to do this? Those are yes/no questions, and they don't require a higher level type of thinking. So go further than that. Teachers help students work in teams and develop leadership qualities. This was the one that I was talking about, student learning teams. This could be something as simple as sections. This could be stand partners. This could be a row. Hey, third row, you guys do this. Third row alto section, you do this. You know what I mean? You could break them up into small teams. The proficient candidate will organize student learning teams for the purpose of developing cooperation, collaboration, and student leadership. And then the accomplished candidate encourages students to create and manage learning teams. It actually almost kind of seems like the proficient candidate is doing more than the accomplished candidate, but essentially what this is that you organize it and you are managing it, but in this case it's sort of like the kids manage it. And you're facilitating that. 4G. 4 is a big ol' heavy standard. Teachers communicate effectively. The proficient candidate uses a variety of methods to communicate effectively with all students. So things like, are you giving directions orally, and do you also have stuff like written down on the board, like maybe the order that you're going to go in for that day? There's a difference between just saying it and having it written on the board. Or even, having a schedule for the week or something like that. Consistently encourages and supports students to articulate thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively. How do you expect students to communicate within the classroom? The accomplished candidate establishes classroom practices that encourage all students to develop effective communication skills. That means everybody, not just the kids who raise their hands and are inclined to speak, but what about their writing? But what about nonverbal ways of showing what they need to do? All those types of things. 4H, because we're still in 4. It's the last one, though. Teachers use a variety of methods to assess what each student has learned. Note that it says what each student has learned, not what the class did that day and how well they played/sang. It is each kid and what they were supposed to learn. Let's see. The proficient candidate uses multiple indicators, both formative and summative, to monitor and evaluate students' progress and to inform instruction, and provides evidence that students attain 21st century knowledge, skills, and dispositions. The accomplished candidate uses information gained from assessment activities to improve teaching practice and students' learning, and provides opportunities for students to assess themselves and others. This is the one that is not done nearly as often as maybe it needs to be. You all, for the most part, have some pretty top-notch error detecting skills. You know when something is wrong. You know when something doesn't sound as good as it should. You know the strategies that need to be used in order to get it to sound better most of the time. What do the kids know about that? How good are they at assessing their own playing, singing, etc.? Do they know the strategies that they need to undertake in order to make it sound better? That's the part that's missed a lot. So see if you can consistently integrate activities that do that. It could even be just as easy as, listen this time and tell me, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst, how well we did with like this aspect of the playing. If you're working on articulation, tell me how accurately we played the articulations from this measure to this measure, rated on a scale of 1 to 5. And if they're rating themselves somewhere in, 3, 1, 2, 3, somewhere in there, what can we do to make it better? How can we play these more accurately? What strategy do we need? And then, call on people from this, that, or the other. And keep doing things like that, and that you'll eventually hit most of the kids. And I don't actually mean strike them. I mean you will eventually call on or find out what each kid knows. Or it could be a thing that they write down as an exit slip, as like a ticket out of class. And we're finally at Standard 5, which is thankfully a short standard. Teachers reflect on their practice. This is another thing that I can't see, and it's the thing that I really wanted to talk to you guys about today, is that you analyze student learning. That's using your data to provide ideas about what can be done to improve student learning. That's the proficient candidate. So how do you know, besides just it sounded better, it sounded worse? In what ways can you use those and other assessments to say, this is what I'm going to do to improve? I know, for example, Matthew had used he had students do some writing of a short rhythmic activity and then pulled it back out the next day. He actually he took this standard literally and actually brought out the student work from previous to inform future things that they were doing. That's great. The accomplished candidate, based upon data, selects or develops instructional approaches that are intentionally tailored to students' learning needs. How are you picking what you're picking? How are you choosing the activities that you're doing based on what they have already shown you? If you don't ask them to show you things, you can't possibly achieve this standard, at least a proficient or accomplished level on this standard. If you're not assessing them, other than it sounded better, it sounded worse, then you can't achieve proficient or accomplished on this standard. Teachers link professional growth to their professional goals. This is where that professional goals and solutions type of thing comes together. You guys have been in for about a month or so. This would be a great time to print off that professional goals thing and work on it with your cooperating teacher. Please do that. This is a good time for it. The proficient candidate participates in recommended activities for professional learning and development. The accomplished candidate seeks out and engages in opportunities to expand professional knowledge and build professional skills. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. Can you show me? Can you tell me? Can I get this? Where do I go? Those types of things. And finally, teachers function effectively in a complex, dynamic environment. You use a variety of research-verified approaches to improve teaching and learning, or you investigate and implement innovative research-verified approaches to improve teaching and learning. So that is the giant monster document that we are assessing you on your ability to fulfill. Crazy. I realize that there's a gallery or a glossary of terms here on what they all are. They've got accomplished candidate, artifact, code of ethics, developing candidate, diversity, what that actually means. Look at the things for it's a pretty big definition. Differences in characteristics of people, places, or things like age, race, ethnicity, culture, gender, education, learning styles, religion, or any other way in which differences occur. Emerging evaluator, formative. You guys all know what formative and summative assessments are. Literacy, North Carolina Standard Course of Study. All of those, I think, are things that you know what they all are. So, yeah. Now, what typically happens is that people used to put this on paper, and they used to sign each one of these and then have to rescan everything because people used to do all of this by hand and write things in, but it just takes too long to write things in. And so by sending you guys the notes page and everything else and communicating with you after an observation, what happens is that at the end of the semester, we sign these. It's like, hey, you are aware of the fact that you should do X, Y, and Z. One of the things that you guys should be doing is essentially reflecting on your teaching, at least the observation that I come and see. If you guys send me those reflections, that would be great. I know some of you I've only seen once, or maybe I've gone to see twice. It's okay if you didn't reflect on the first one. That's not a big deal. But reflect after that and kind of send it to me so that I can be like, yes, this child is a reflective practitioner. Wonderful. Because there's also a dispositions assessment that we do. So, and one of them is that you are a reflective practitioner. So be sure to jot down a few thoughts. The fact that I'm asking you guys frequently 3 things you're proud of and things that you would like to improve about your teaching is also a way in which I check to see how reflective you are. If you made it this far, God bless you. I realize that this is long, but I wanted to explain my way through that observation document because it's kind of a beast. So if you have any questions, please email me. Again, I'm so sorry that I can't be there today. Something came up transportation-wise, and I just don't feel that it's fair for you all to come to campus if it's not a guarantee that I will be there. And so that's why I made this, because I wanted to be able to talk through this with you. Again, do some reflecting. I'm going to be contacting you all via email to set up some more observations, pull out the professional goals and solutions, start working on your lessons if you haven't already. Keep your eye on your email inbox. Those of you who have sent me things to look over, I will be digging into those. Thank you for being patient with me while I was away at conference. And yeah, you guys know that you can reach me via email. You can call my phone, but it might be on silent. Please don't be mad at me if I don't return your cell phone call or your text. But I will try and get back in touch with you if you have questions as soon as possible. I hope you guys have a restful, wonderful Monday and a good rest of the teaching week. Kevin, I will see you on Wednesday. And let's see. Jordan, Matthew, Elizabeth, sort of keep your eyes peeled on your inbox because I want to set up observations with you guys pretty soon. All right, guys, thank you very much.